we have a relatively packed agenda, but again, I think it'll be a relatively quick meeting. We have 3 sets of minutes to approve from previous meetings. In our executive director report, we have a new team member to introduce. We have the license application status report that we've gotten the last several weeks with, I think, some additional data on where things are at in the process, which I think will be pretty clear in terms of expectations of how this will go forward. We have 2 topics that need to be discussed and voted on. One is we are required by law to submit a report to the legislature by July 15th on the transition of medical marijuana from the Department of Public Health to our commission. We have a draft of that to review. We are also going to publish, based upon our discussion and vote today, a request for information with respect to an open data architecture so that both we on the commission have access to data about the application and licensing process, but that we make parts of that are not private, make that available to the public. And so we're going to go through that. There is one license application that we have received back all the information from our third-party background check vendor, as well as from the city and town, that we're ready to review based upon the staff recommendation. And that's it for the formal part of the agenda. So why don't we get started? And first order of business is approval of minutes from previous meetings. As I said, we had, this works. There we go. We have 3 sets of minutes to discuss and approve from previous meetings, first being June 21st, 2018. Can I ask the commissioners, have everyone had a chance to review the minutes from June 21st?
Yes. Yep.
Can I have a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Let the record show Commissioner Doyle made the motion to approve, seconded by Commissioner Flanagan. All in favor?
Aye.
Let the record show the Commission unanimously approves the minutes from June 21st, 2018. Thank you. Next set of minutes are from June 26th, 2018. Can I ask the Commissioners, have they had a chance to review? Are there any questions or comments? Okay, then can I have a motion to approve the minutes from June 26th, 2018?
So moved. Second.
Let the record show Commissioner Flanagan made the motion to approve, seconded by Commissioner Doyle. All in favor?
Aye.
Let the record show the Commission unanimously approved those minutes. Thank you. The final set of minutes to approve are from July 2nd, 2018. Has the Commission had a chance to review, and are there any questions? Can I have a motion then to approve?
So moved.
Can I have a second, please?
Second.
Let the record show Commissioner Doyle made the motion to approve, seconded by Commissioner Flanagan. All in favor?
Aye.
Let the record show that the Commission unanimously approved the minutes from July 2nd, 2018. Thank you. And I think we're pretty close to caught up. We have one more set from the last meeting. But thank you for all the efforts that we have from the staff to get these minutes done as quickly and as accurately as they've done. So thank you for that. Moving into the Executive Director's report. There's something about this clicker that...
Computer.
That's what I thought. There we go. So starting with, actually before we get into that, I guess there's some staffing. So if you could start with staffing now, Mr. Executive Director.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can anybody hear me?
I can see the back. Can everybody hear the Executive Director? Thank you. Go ahead, Sean.
I'll project. So as you indicated, there's actually 2 folks that have joined the Commission and joined our growing team. I'll introduce both today. First being Jamie Blair. Jamie is our Manager of Infrastructure and Applications. Jamie comes to us most recently from Central New England Health Alliance as a project manager and previously as a senior integration analyst. He joins Dave McKenna's team, our Chief Technology Officer, as we start to build out our technology department. So we're very excited to have Jamie on board.
And Commissioner Doyle is happy to have you on board.
Everything at me today,
well,
really?
okay, I'll start spreading it around.
Okay.
I don't think that's necessary either. The next team member that we're excited to introduce is Sherry Defoe. So Sherry joins the department or the agency as a licensing specialist on Kyle Potman's team, our Director of Licensing. She comes to us from the Division of Capital Asset Management and Maintenance as an office support specialist and was in a similar role at the Department of Public Health previously. And again, she's joined the Commission as a licensing specialist as we begin to build out that team, which is a certainly timely and important set of hands to help us as we begin to embark on our licensing process and also getting from provisional to final. So very excited to have her join us, and Both Jamie and Sherry started on Monday, and of course have arrived every day since, which is always progress.
Always a good thing.
Very excited to have both of them. We also have currently open until Friday the position of HR generalist, which we're accepting applications for, and we'll soon be posting the position of enforcement counsel.
Okay. Thank you very much. Anything else on staffing?
No, not at this time. Nope.
So, should we do the license application stats?
Sure. So our traditional slides are now available. We have 1,968 total applications that have interacted with our system. Of those, 163 are pending with at least one packet having been submitted to the Commission. 102 have been withdrawn. 1,699 are incomplete or in some form of completion, not yet having been submitted to the Commission. And of course, the Commission has issued 4 provisional licenses. Those 4 plus the 163 that are pending are broken down into the table below, which is 2 craft marijuana cooperatives, 3 independent testing laboratory, 1 laboratory agent, 40 cultivator, 35 establishment agent, 9 microbusiness, 23 product manufacturer, 3 research facility, 46 retailer, 2 transportation with an existing establishment license, and 3 third-party transportation. That's how we get to the 167 total, again, that being the 163 with at least one part, as well as the 4 provisional licenses.
Great, thank you. Questions before we move on?
So the big question is obviously how many have submitted all 4 packets. That number is now 73. I've also tried to add another kind of column to this, which indicates the difference between the last week. So you'll see that there's additional 10 licenses or 10 applications that have submitted all 4 packets since the Commission's last meeting. Those break down into the following: 1 independent testing laboratory, 25 cultivation, 3 microbusiness, 16 product manufacturer, 3 research facility, 24 retail, and 1 transportation with an existing marijuana establishment license. The breakdown from a priority status standpoint is 47 priority R&D, 3 economic empowerment priority, and 23 general applicants. Those 73 applications represent 39 separate entities.
Questions?
So this is a new slide. I mentioned at the Commission's last meeting that I was trying to, I guess, give some context to that 73 number and where that stands as far as the Commission's review. You'll see from a flowchart standpoint, as far as when an application is actually submitted with all 4 having been submitted, therefore ready for consideration by the Commission staff, that would be submitted in awaiting review. If we have reviewed it and information is necessary, we will communicate that to the applicant. That would be the next row there. If it's been deemed complete, we'll then initiate the third-party interactions, which includes a municipal notice to the municipality that the entity intends to be located, as well as initiating the background check process. If all of those materials are received back by Commission staff, we will then prepare it for a recommendation for the Commission's consideration. And then finally, if an application has in fact been considered by the Commission. So as that breaks down, there are 39 that are awaiting review or in the process of being reviewed by staff. 10 have been identified as not having sufficient information to be considered complete, and those applicants have been notified. 19 are out and awaiting third-party reaction, so that includes, again, the municipal notice as well as the background check. 1 is prepared for the Commission's consideration. That is the one that's pending before you today. And of course, 4 have been considered by the Commission. So given this is a new slide, I'm happy to take any questions you may have on it.
First of all, I just want to thank you. This is actually a very helpful breakdown of where we are in the process, so thank you for doing this.
And I think it's important to note these are not static numbers in any given day as well. So these were prepared, would have been for Tuesday of this week. So these numbers may have changed in that time, but this is, I think, a good snapshot of the workload. And of course, the 39 that are waiting review, that includes those 10 applications that have come in since the Commission's last meeting. So they would be factored into that number as well. So again, at any given day, these numbers may be fluid, but it tries to capture at least the different status that they may be in those days.
Great. Are there questions on this or comments? Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
And then lastly is the familiar map, which indicates where those 73 are located across Massachusetts. Again, from just a change perspective, there's 2 additional applications from Berkshire County, 1 from Franklin County, 3 from Hampshire County, 2 from Middlesex, 1 from Essex, and 1 in Plymouth County. The rest remain the same.
Questions? Okay.
Great.
I guess before we move on to the actual one application the staff has a recommendation on, let's go through the other 2 topics.
Sure.
Starting with the recommendation with respect to the report to the legislature on
Great.
the pH transition.
So as the Commission knows, there is an ongoing discussion in the legislature in the legislation that rewrote the ballot question migrates and transitions the oversight of the medical use of marijuana program from the Department of Public Health to the Cannabis Control Commission. Since the Commission has been appointed and since I began with the Commission, there's been an ongoing conversation and dialogue with the Department of Public Health. First, I think to mostly understand the program and get our best understanding of the operations and the regulations and how things, I guess, their systems, their structures, and their essentially their organizational chart and how things function. So that's been an ongoing conversation. The legislature does mandate a report be issued to them by July 15th. You have a draft before you, which I really want to stress that it's been a collaborative effort with the Department of Public Health to date. We have had regular meetings, if not weekly, certainly several times a week, and if not weekly, then many times at least each month.
And that's been going back 5 months, I think. We started our meetings with them approximately 4 or 5 months ago.
I arrived in November, and I would say really in earnest November into December, so it's been an ongoing conversation. They've been very valuable in helping us as we build out our team here as well, and we tried to leverage their experience and their expertise. And this report that's before you for your consideration, I think hopefully serves as a summary of those activities. It's certainly not complete in being such vivid detail. Instead, it's really a high-level overview of how we've broken up those conversations across the departments within the Commission. I want to also commend our staff at the Commission for really jumping into this effort, again, to understand the medical use of marijuana program, but also understand how once that merger and transition occurs, how the 2 programs coexist under one regulatory umbrella and one oversight entity being the Commission. So,
And to whom does this get submitted? You said the legislature, but whom specifically?
Specifically, it is due to the Joint Committee on Marijuana Policy, and again, it's not later than July 15th of 2018. So this would be, if it meets with your approval, would be submitted at the end of this week, therefore meeting that deadline, continuing to meet our deadlines, of course. So I'll just give a high-level overview of it. Of course, I'm happy to take any questions that you may have, but primarily, again, so the report is due to the legislature by the end of this week, and we've made significant progress in addressing the operational areas that the legislature identified, but also taking a look at the program and understanding how we can best migrate it and merge it with our program. We've made great progress in the areas of personnel, licensing, financing, the legal perspective, public records, technology, communications, and of course, physical office space. We are confident that the transition must occur by the end of this calendar year, December 31st of 2018. We're confident that that's possible and that we're capable of doing that, and we're continuing to work through the real specific logistics of achieving that. We do try to, in this report, give an overview of both the adult use program as well as the medical use of marijuana program, which really just, I think, hopes to identify how in some cases the 2 programs are different. Of course, the medical program being vertically integrated, the adult use program not being vertically integrated, and also the fact that there are 2 different sets of regulations that ultimately must be migrated and merged. We've also tried to understand the staffing of the Department of Public Health's program, primarily because that program resides within the department, and of course there's folks assigned to that program but are not necessarily directly employed within that program. So understanding who exactly is included in that, what roles that they have, what functions they serve, and how, again, that may migrate over to us. We've also made sure that as that program evolves, that we're working collaboratively with the department to make sure that it's adequately staffed, and if there's any sort of turnover that might be necessary to be replaced, that we're part of that conversation, given that we'll be overseeing that program in short order. Lastly, we've also talked about, not lastly, but next, we've talked about finances, because the legislation also takes the marijuana regulation fund, which is the fund that our proceeds are deposited into, and takes the medical use of the medical trust fund and transfers the deposits into that. And we've worked through logistics as far as how to achieve that. We've also collaborated with the comptroller's office in order to facilitate that, and that's something we're confident that would be capable of doing. We've also tried to take any contracts that program may have and understand how we can either migrate them over or absorb them within existing contracts that we have already. A perfect example I'll give you is Creative Services. Our background check vendor is also the background check vendor for the Department of Public Health, so we're confident that transition can be done with relative ease. From a technology standpoint, there's a number of technology needs. Of course, just the network that the system that program exists within, how we migrate that, the profiles of those employees and making sure that records are able to be transferred, things as simple as phone numbers and email addresses, how those things get migrated. But of course, there's also a patient registration portal that's tied to the virtual gateway, and we tried to unravel and dig into that as well. So again, all issues, big and little, have been considered. Similarly, the medical use of marijuana program is currently located at 99 Chauncey Street. We, of course, are located at 101 Federal Street, and we are in the process of identifying a long-term headquarters for the commission, and how those things coincide is another element of logistics that need to be worked out in the interim months before the transfer, which we're confident we can also do. So again, that's a real high-level issue or overview of the issues that we've confronted. I'm happy to take any questions you might have. We're confident this report obviously meets the legislative requirement to issue an interim progress report, but also declares that we are confident we can make this transition happen by the end of the calendar year, and we're very proud and pleased to be working with the Department of Public Health and ensuring that.
Thank you. Are there questions or comments? I guess I have one. First of all, thanks. I know that you and our general counsel and our chief of staff, hopefully not admitting anybody, have been meeting regularly with staff from the Department of Public Health and taking a lot of time. It's a complicated issue. Thank you for your efforts on that. Second, you did mention you were highly confident that the transition would occur as required by law by the end of the year. When? I'm not asking you for a date, but I'm asking you for a date when we'll have a date in terms of when that transition will occur. What's your feeling about that?
I guess it would be hard to say. I mean, I think there's a number of the items that I've indicated require some lead time. So of course the regulatory process requires some lead time as far as our adoption of any regulations, but also their rescinding of regulations that are required, as well as the discussion of fees and the like too. So that would be the longest from a timing standpoint, lead time that would be necessary. But we also, our intention, and I failed to mention this earlier and I apologize, our intention also is to have as least disruption as possible to that program. That includes the employee experience, making sure that the folks that work for that program understand that as we are building our team, that they are going to be part of that team in the long run, but also that we are as least disruptive as possible, but also to patients and RMDs as well.
That's critical.
That oversight is hopefully going to be seamless, and that requires, I think, some real, I think, thoughtful logistics to occur. So I'd be hesitant to say I'll know in a month's time, but I think we're continuing to meet on a weekly basis, and I think we have a good snapshot of what needs to occur. So as we begin to map that out, I'm certainly happy to give the commission kind of from time to time brief reports and kind of a status update as well.
I think that's important because part of the process obviously is the regulatory process, which requires lead time in terms of public meetings and public hearings. So the sooner we can kind of put together a timeline, that'd be great. But
sure.
I certainly appreciate the complexity.
Yep, and I guess I'm happy to work to try to develop a strategy or a schedule for that, and to come back to the commission in pretty short order with some
Appreciate
answers.
that. Thank you. Are there other comments or questions? Then can I ask for a motion to approve the draft as submitted by the executive director?
So moved. Second.
Great, thank you. Hey, you guys got to pick up the slack a little bit. Let the record show that Commissioner Flanagan made the motion to approve, seconded by Commissioner Doyle. All in favor?
Aye.
Let the record show the Commission unanimously approved the draft so that we can meet our legislative mandate. Thank you again to you all involved in pulling this together, and to the Department of Public Health for being as collaborative as they are and have been Next item on the agenda is the RFR with respect to open data.
So you have before you, for your consideration, another procurement. This one, as you may recall, during her presentation, Dr. Julie Johnson indicated the desire to develop and build out a data warehouse for the Commission to serve as a repository of Commission-generated data, but also other data that we might be collecting, having that warehouse eventually evolve into a real repository of information that we intend to use internally, but also the ability, giving us the ability to publish it and make it an open data platform and strategy, which I think speaks to the Commission's mission statement of wanting first to be a world-class agency, but also really meets the mission of being a very transparent agency. So this is really the procurement that would drive that process and help us develop that repository. So what we're looking for is a request for responses for business intelligence and open data initiatives. The timelines that are listed are draft and form mostly because certainly don't want to make any assumptions as to the Commission's approval, but also want to try to map that out with an aggressive timeline in mind, but also a realistic timeline. So we will continue to massage that. As in the past, the Commission, when issuing procurements, has included a clause that gives us the ability to prepare it for publication. So that we would seek that same case here. So again, as I mentioned, it's a request for responses for business intelligence and open data technology. It's really intentional on our part to enhance insight and governance internally as well as externally, and again with information that's generated by the Commission as well as any external sources. And we're really trying to develop an open data strategy that will allow us to present information in a real, I think, clean and digestible way, but also give the public and Commission staff access to that repository in an open source fashion. We're looking for one vendor ideally, and so the last procurement that we did was relative to the social equity program. That was an RFQ looking for multiple vendors. This would be a single vendor with an ideal contract of about 2 years with 2 one-year options. And again, as I mentioned, it's really meant to take this data, serve as a repository, but then also help us visualize it and present it to the public. So you have the information in front of you. I'm happy to take any questions that you might have. Again, this is really the backbone of that open data strategy, though.
Are there questions or comments? Commissioner Doyle?
I just want to thank you and General Counsel for the work that you've done on this, and I just want to clarify that the RFR for the open data environment is going to be confined to the adult use program, since we were just talking about the transition of the medical use, and obviously there are additional considerations with the protection of privacy.
That's right.
So.
Yep. And from limited standpoint, I think it would be information that we're allowed, obviously, or that the Commission would approve being collected and stored in this environment. We do ask for, obviously, for security considerations of data retention, but there's other information that the Commission's collecting that we will not share, we will not publish. That also includes the content of background checks and the like, or the fingerprint responses. So anything that needs to be segregated and protected will absolutely be protected, and that includes patient information.
Okay, so is the intent when the medical use marijuana program transitions over that they will also be part of the open data project?
I think elements of it, so for instance, licenses and license information, and anything that can be aggregated or de-identified, but certainly never with an intention to either store in this environment or publish within this environment any information that should not be.
Including about patients?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Commissioner Pratt?
I want to say thank you to the staff.
You have one in front of you, actually.
That doesn't work.
Oh, it's not working.
I want to say thank you to the staff for putting this together. I do want to make sure that as we're putting this out, that we are placing a premium on making sure that data, because the data is accessible, meaning to folks with visual impairment, hearing impairment, I would really like for that to be highlighted very explicitly.
Sure.
Because of the fact that this is really going to be a cornerstone of our ability to provide information on the program.
Thank you.
In the context of preparing a publication, we will, where possible, make that a very explicit point.
Other comments or questions? And with the caveat that Commissioner Doyle and the request of Commissioner McBride, can I ask for a motion to approve the RFR as written?
So
I think if I got heard, Commissioner Doyle made the motion to approve, seconded by Commissioner McBride. All in favor?
Aye.
Let the record show that the Commission has to approve the RFR for release. When would you expect this to go out? When would you expect responses to come in? And when would you expect a decision to be made?
So our hope, and again, we'll try to, being mindful of the fact that we have an existing procurement that's out there now for the social equity program, our intention would be to publish this as soon as possible, give enough time for folks to evaluate it, submit any questions that they might have. Based on this timeline, we're looking at potentially a mid-August procurement as far as identifying the vendor. If we're being completely realistic, I would say probably late August is more likely. That also, I think, gives us enough time, gives vendors enough time to be thoughtful about their responses, but also giving us sufficient time to be thorough in our review. So probably late August or early September is when we could identify a vendor.
And I just wanted to, thank you. I just want to acknowledge that while I think that all of the commissioners view this as an important thing to meet the requirements of the law as well as to our mission statement, I do want to acknowledge that the executive director has really been driving this. I know he's very passionate about this, and just wanted to acknowledge that and appreciate your effort because I do think this is an important part of us meeting our objectives and the aspirations of the mission statement. So thank you very much. Anything else before we move on to the staff recommendation on licenses?
No.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just a request for the next agenda.
Yeah.
Just looking at the licensing data, the econ empowerment applicants has been at 3, I think, since the first report.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be asking for a presentation or report from the staff. The staff has done everything that we've asked, but we haven't been able to have the conversation about that as a commission yet. So I'd like to put that on the agenda.
It's done. Anything else, Selectman? Okay, thank you for that. That's an important topic to get into. Okay, so we do have one application the staff has a recommendation on. It's Cultivate Holdings LLC. License number, the application number is MCN 281266. This is for Tier 2 cultivation. Mr. Executive Director.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as you indicated, the application for your consideration today is for the entity of Cultivate Holdings LLC. They intend to be located at 1764 Main Street in Leicester. The application is for a cultivation Tier 2, which permits between 5,001 and 10,000 square feet of canopy. The applicant also has 2 additional applications before the commission, having previously issued a provisional license for their retail. They also have a product manufacturing application before us. The individuals associated with the business are the same. They are Stephen Barber, Robert Lally, Samuel Barber, and Derek Blethen as a manager. There are no other entities that have been listed on the applications having direct or indirect authority over the establishment. They are a priority applicant, having secured priority status as an existing RMD. That RMD is in compliance with DPH. They intend to be co-located, the adult use and RMD in the same facility in Leicester, and they have been issued a final certificate of registration for dispensing, cultivation, and processing. They have a host community agreement, was executed on April 30th, 2018, and certification of that has been provided to the Commission. They held their community outreach meeting on March 29th. That meeting was posted on the Worcester Telegram and Gazette at least 7 days prior to the meeting. The applicant has certified that notice went to the municipality as well as any abutters, and they certified their compliance with meeting all of the requirements. We received no objections from the municipality. In fact, we received a response on June 19th stating that the applicant was in compliance or is in compliance with all local zoning ordinances and bylaws. As far as their plan to positively impact areas of disproportionate impact, they intend to do the following: direct giving, committed to donating a minimum of 10% of net profits to local charities once profitable. They will provide sponsorship for regular, successful fundraising events for community organizations, and they are committed to creating a hiring model that intentionally employs vulnerable and disadvantaged individuals. This is the same as the impact plan that was provided for their previous retail license. No concerns were risen during the background check process on individuals associated with the application. Similarly, no concerns arose during the background check on entities associated with the application. There were no disclosures of any past civil or criminal actions and no disclosures of any occupational license issues. Similarly, no disclosures of any business interests in other jurisdictions. They secured a certificate of good standing with the Secretary of the Commonwealth as well as the Department of Revenue. The certificate of good standing for the Secretary of the Commonwealth was March 30th, April 3rd for the certificate of good standing for the Department of Revenue. As far as their management and operations overview, they propose that it'll take, for them to be operational, will be immediate upon the granting of a final license. They are an existing RMD and they have all human and capital expenditures to begin operations, and they've already made those. Any amendments to their standard operating procedures have been drafted and can be instituted in order to comply with the Commission's regulations, can be instituted upon final license. There are proposed hours of operation on Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. to 7 p.m., Friday and Saturday, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m., and Sunday, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. They've submitted summaries of the following plans, policies, and procedures: security plan, prevention of diversion plan, storage of marijuana plan, transportation plan, inventory procedures, quality control and testing procedures, personnel procedures, dispensing procedures, record-keeping procedures, maintenance of final records policy, and their diversity plan. They've fully complied with submitting all of these summaries, and those summaries have been determined to be substantially compliant with our regulations. And full compliance, of course, will be reviewed during our inspection process and will be required before any final license is issued. The diversity plan outlines the following goals. They seek to become a proactive leader in the Massachusetts business community by assembling a diverse team. They designed a hiring process to mitigate staffing bias and judge the candidates solely on their merit and potential. They will prioritize the hiring, training, and advancement of people from diverse socioeconomic backgrounds. They'll also seek to be inclusive in the hiring process to offer service opportunities to diverse groups of vendors, suppliers, and contractors. Their goal is to match or exceed the diversity of Leicester. And finally, they will implement a training program as part of their onboarding process that will educate participants about cultural differences in the workplace.
This is the same plan as in...
This is the same plan as their retail, that's correct. Their plan for cultivation is to use their existing RMD cultivation policies and procedures. They've demonstrated that they have an understanding of cultivation principles by summarizing their goals for adequate spacing, lighting, water, and fertilizer distribution, and the grow environment to be operational. The summary goes into more detail as to the policies and procedures at each of the following stages: propagation of seeds and clones, cloning and cutting, vegetation, flowering, and harvesting. There's no applicable summaries of products or obtaining marijuana products, given that this is a cultivation license. Therefore, the Commission staff recommends issuing a provisional license with the following conditions: that the final license is subject to the required individual successfully completing a fingerprint-based check of the state and national criminal history databases, that the final license is subject to certification that the applicant remains in compliance with DPH regulations, that a final license is subject to inspection and audit to ascertain compliance with the requirements listed in our regulations, that the final license is subject to inspection and audit to ascertain that their facilities are compliant with all applicable state and local codes, bylaws, ordinances, and regulations, that the applicant shall cooperate with and provide information to Commission investigators, agents, and employees upon request, and finally, that the provisional license is subject to the payment of the appropriate license fee pursuant to our regulations. We've based this recommendation on the applicant's demonstrated compliance with the laws and regulations of the Commonwealth, their suitability for licensure, and upon the evaluation of the thoroughness of the applicant's responses to the required criteria. We certify that due diligence review of the application has been performed, and as of this date, the applicant has demonstrated compliance with the laws and regulations of the Commonwealth and their suitability for licensure, and accordingly, the applicant is therefore recommended for a provisional license with the previously mentioned conditions.
Thank you. Comments or questions? Commissioner McBride? Okay, then I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the recommendation of staff to issue a provisional license to Cultivate Holdings LLC, MCN 281266 for Tier 2 cultivation. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Can I have a second, please? Let the record show Commissioner Doyle made the motion to approve, seconded by Commissioner McBride. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Then let the record show the Commission has to approve the recommendation of staff. Thanks to the staff. There are 19, I guess, that are kind of right behind us in the queue, so I know there's a lot of work on the table for the staff. So in advance, our appreciation for all for the work. Thank you. Mr. Executive Director, anything else?
No, not at this time.
Thank you. I am not aware of any not aware of any additional agenda items. I was not aware at the time that I posted the agenda, or we posted the agenda. So our next commission meeting is 2 weeks from today, Thursday, July 26th at 1 p.m. Location to be confirmed. We're hoping that it's going to be at the Health Policy Commission. Again, we have not had confirmation, or have we? No, we have not. So we'll obviously, as soon as we know more specifically where we're going to be, we'll update that. There being no further business for the commission, can I ask for a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Let's work to Commissioner Flanagan made a motion to approve, seconded by Commissioner Doyle. All in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you very much. As of 1:40 p.m. What's that?